Imagine waking up tomorrow with $10 million in your account. You look the same, sound the same. Your personality hasn't changed overnight. Yet somehow the world starts responding to you differently. People return your calls faster. Your opinions suddenly carry more weight. Opportunities appear where there were none before. And strangers who once overlooked you now seem unusually interested in what you have to say. Most people think wealth changes who you are, but that's not what happens. What wealth often changes is how the world sees you. And once you notice this pattern, you start seeing it everywhere. The same idea sounds smarter when it comes from someone successful. The same advice feels more valuable when it's attached to a respected name. The same person can walk into a room and receive two completely different reactions depending on the signal they project. That's because human beings are constantly making assumptions. We look for clues, we search for indicators, we try to estimate value before we truly understand it. And financial success happens to be one of the strongest signals people recognize. Today, we're going to break down the invisible stages of wealth and status. Not to glorify money, not to worship success, but to understand something far more important: how people behave when they believe someone has value. Because the higher you climb, the more human nature reveals itself, and some of those revelations are uncomfortable. Level 1, the invisible stage at the beginning. The hardest part isn't failure, it's obscurity. Nobody talks about this stage because it isn't dramatic. There are no headlines, no celebrations, no recognition, just effort. Day after day, month after month, sometimes year after year, you work, you learn, you improve, and almost nobody notices. This is where most dreams quietly die. Not because people aren't capable, but because they mistake a lack of attention for a lack of potential. The truth is that attention follows proof, and before you've built proof, the world rarely pays attention. You might have incredible ideas. You might have tremendous ambition. You might be willing to outwork everyone around you. Yet none of those things are immediately visible. People don't see your future. They see your current position. And that's why this stage feels unfair. Because in many ways, it is. You know what you're capable of becoming. The world only sees what you've already become. Many people take this personally. They assume they're being rejected. But most of the time, they're simply being overlooked. There's a difference. Rejection means someone evaluated you and said no. Being overlooked means they never looked in the first place. And that's a much more common experience than most people realize. Most people think the beginning of the journey is filled with rejection. It isn't. The beginning is usually filled with silence. Nobody criticizes your ideas because nobody is listening. Nobody doubts your vision because nobody knows it exists. You can spend months improving your skills, reading books, working late nights, and making sacrifices that nobody sees. And that's what makes this stage so difficult. Human beings can tolerate failure better than invisibility. At least failure proves you were noticed. Invisibility makes you question whether your effort matters at all. You've probably experienced it before. You share an idea and the room barely reacts. Months later, someone more established says the exact same thing, and suddenly everyone pays attention. The idea didn't change. The signal behind it did. That's one of the first uncomfortable truths about status. The world often evaluates the messenger before it evaluates the message. And until you understand that, you'll spend years taking indifference personally. Level 2, the recognition stage, then something interesting begins to happen. Not a massive breakthrough, not overnight success. Just small changes that are easy to miss. People start remembering your name. Conversations last a little longer. Opportunities appear more often. The same ideas that once received blank stares now receive curiosity. It's subtle, but it's real. And if you're paying attention, you can feel it. This is the stage where the signal begins to strengthen. You haven't reached the top. You haven't achieved extraordinary success. But you've built enough evidence for people to start taking notice. The danger is that many people mistake this stage for arrival. They think visibility equals influence. It doesn't. Visibility simply means you've entered the conversation. Influence means you can shape it. There's a huge difference. At this stage, people begin treating you differently because you've demonstrated something valuable. Consistency, progress, discipline, results. Even modest success creates a perception shift. Human beings naturally look for signs that someone is moving forward. Movement attracts attention. Stagnation repels it. That's why two people can start in the exact same place but receive completely different reactions a few years later. One continues growing, the other remains stuck. The gap isn't just financial, it's psychological. People are drawn toward momentum. And momentum creates opportunities that weren't available before. But here's what most people don't realize. Recognition is often more dangerous than obscurity. Because recognition feeds the ego. When nobody notices you, you're forced to focus on improving. When people start noticing you, the temptation becomes protecting your image instead of improving your reality. And that's where growth slows down. Many people become addicted to looking successful before becoming successful. They start optimizing for appearance, for validation, for attention. instead of focusing on the habits that created progress in the first place. The people who continue climbing understand something important. Recognition is not the reward, it's the invitation, and the invitation is only valuable if you keep earning it. Level 3, the momentum stage. This is where life starts feeling different. Not easier, different. Because for the first time, your effort begins producing visible results. The seeds you've been planting for years finally start breaking through the surface, and suddenly, things that once felt impossible become normal. People return your calls. Meetings happen faster. Doors open with less resistance. Opportunities seem to appear out of nowhere, but they aren't appearing out of nowhere. You're simply becoming visible to opportunities that were always there. Think about it. Have you ever bought a specific car and then suddenly started seeing that same car everywhere? The cars weren't new. Your awareness was. Success works the same way. As your capabilities increase, you start recognizing opportunities that were invisible before. And that creates momentum. Momentum is one of the most powerful forces in human life, because momentum changes behavior. When people experience repeated setbacks, they become cautious, they hesitate, they doubt themselves, they avoid risk. But when people experience repeated wins, something shifts. Their expectations change. They begin assuming success is possible, and those expectations influence every decision they make. They speak differently. They negotiate differently. They carry themselves differently. Not because they're pretending, because confidence is often the natural result of evidence. You stop hoping things will work and start expecting that your effort will eventually pay off. That expectation becomes visible. Others can sense it. Confidence, when grounded in competence, is magnetic. People trust certainty. They follow conviction. They respond to those who appear to know where they're going. But momentum introduces a new challenge, the temptation to believe you're unstoppable. Success can be as dangerous as failure when it distorts your perception, because momentum creates the illusion that every future decision will be correct, and that's rarely true. Many people sabotage themselves at this stage because they confuse a winning season with permanent superiority. They stop learning. They stop listening. They stop questioning themselves. The very habits that created their momentum slowly disappear. And when that happens, momentum eventually reverses. The smartest people understand that momentum is rented, not owned. Every day requires another payment, another effort, another decision, another improvement. That's why long-term success belongs to those who remain students even after they become successful. Because the moment you think you figured everything out, life usually reminds you that you haven't. Level 4. The perception stage. This is where things start getting complicated. Because up until now, most of the changes you've experienced have been tied directly to your actions. You worked harder. You became more skilled. You created more value. And the results followed. But at this stage, something new enters the equation. Perception. People stop reacting only to what you've done. They start reacting to what they believe you represent. And those are not always the same thing. A person can become successful and remain humble. Yet some people will assume they're arrogant. A person can remain generous, yet others will assume they're selfish. A person can stay exactly the same, yet the world around them begins creating stories about who they must be. That's the strange thing about success. The more visible you become, the less control you have over how others interpret you. People begin responding to the idea of you, not just the reality of you. And if you're not careful, you'll start believing the stories too. That's where many people lose themselves. They become attached to an image. They start managing perceptions instead of building substance. Every decision becomes filtered through a simple question: how will this make me look? And the moment appearance becomes more important than reality, growth slows. Because genuine progress happens in private. Nobody sees the workouts, the studying, the failures, the sacrifices, the lonely nights. They only see the outcome. Which means the people who continue winning at this stage are often the people willing to ignore appearances entirely. They understand that reputation is important, but reputation is a byproduct, not the goal. The goal remains the same as it was on day one. Become more valuable, create more value, keep improving. Level 5, the freedom stage. Most people think wealth buys luxury, and it does. But luxury is not the greatest benefit. Freedom is. That's the moment many people finally understand what money is really for. It's not the watches, the cars, the houses. Those things are visible. Freedom isn't, and that's exactly why it's more valuable. Imagine being able to walk away from a toxic situation without fear. Imagine refusing a bad opportunity because you don't need it. Imagine making decisions based on long-term goals instead of short-term survival. That's freedom. And freedom changes people, not because it makes them better, because it removes pressure. When someone is desperate, they often make desperate choices. When someone feels trapped, they often tolerate things they shouldn't. When someone lacks options, they frequently choose the least painful path rather than the best one. But freedom creates space. Space to think, space to plan, space to act intentionally. And intentional decisions compound. One smart choice leads to another, then another, then another. until years later, the gap between two people becomes enormous. Not because one person was smarter, but because one person had the ability to think beyond immediate survival. This is why many wealthy individuals value time more than money. Money can be replaced, time cannot. A bad investment can recover, a wasted decade never returns. The truly successful eventually become obsessed with protecting their attention, their focus, their energy, because they understand that these resources are even more valuable than capital. Level 6. The authority stage. At some point, your reputation begins arriving before you do. That's when you've entered a completely different game. People know your work. They've heard your name. They've seen your results, and whether you like it or not, they form opinions before you ever speak. This creates tremendous advantages, but it also creates tremendous responsibility. Because authority changes expectations, people expect more from someone they view as successful. More competence, more wisdom, more consistency, more answers, and while that can open incredible doors, it can also become a burden. Because attention magnifies everything. Strengths become more visible, weaknesses become more visible, success becomes more visible, mistakes become more visible, and the larger your platform grows, the more carefully people watch. That's why many highly successful individuals appear disciplined. Not because they're naturally disciplined, because the consequences of poor decisions become larger. Credibility becomes a form of currency, and credibility is slow to build, fast to lose. People can spend 20 years earning trust and 20 minutes destroying it, which is why sustainable success is almost always built on consistency, not brilliance. Level 7, the influence stage. This is the stage most people imagine when they think about wealth: the private jets, the luxury homes, the exclusive events, the powerful connections, the visible symbols that signal success to the outside world. But those things aren't what make this stage unique. The real difference is influence. At lower levels, you spend most of your time pursuing opportunities. At this level, opportunities begin pursuing you. Investors reach out first. Partnerships arrive unexpectedly. Introductions happen without effort. Conversations that once required years of networking suddenly happen because someone opened a door for you. From the outside, it can look effortless, almost magical, as if success has developed its own gravity. And in some ways it has. Because influence compounds just like money does. The more trust you've built, the more opportunities appear. The more opportunities appear, the more influence you gain. And the cycle continues. But there is a side of this stage that very few people discuss. The higher your signal rises, the harder it becomes to know who is responding to you and who is responding to what you represent. If someone treats you exceptionally well, how do you know why? Is it because they genuinely respect you, or because they want access to your network? Your resources, your reputation, your influence? Success changes incentives, and incentives shape behavior. This doesn't mean everyone becomes dishonest. Far from it. Many incredible relationships are built at every level of success. But influence creates noise, and noise makes clarity harder to find. That's why some of the most successful people in the world become extremely protective of their inner circles. When everyone wants something from you, the people who want nothing become priceless. And so, what is the biggest misunderstanding about wealth? Most people believe money changes people. Sometimes it does, but not in the way they think. Money rarely creates character, it reveals it. The generous person often becomes more generous. The selfish person often becomes more selfish. The disciplined person gains more opportunities to apply discipline. The reckless person gains more opportunities to make expensive mistakes. Money is an amplifier. It turns up the volume. It doesn't completely rewrite the song. And the same principle applies to the people around you. As your financial status changes, you'll notice different reactions. Some people will celebrate your growth. Some will doubt it. Some will try to benefit from it. Some will be inspired by it. None of those reactions are truly about money. They're about human nature. Money simply makes them easier to see. That's why the smartest people focus on becoming valuable before becoming wealthy. Because wealth without character is fragile. Influence without wisdom is dangerous. And success without purpose eventually feels empty. If you've made it this far, you may have noticed something. None of these stages were really about money. Money was simply the measuring stick. The deeper story was about perception, opportunity, freedom, responsibility, influence, and ultimately, human behavior. Because the number in your bank account doesn't determine your worth, but it does affect how the world responds to you. That's reality. Mistake is believing that external responses define who you are. They don't. The applause doesn't define you. The criticism doesn't define you. The attention doesn't define you. And neither does the lack of attention. What defines you is what you continue building when nobody is watching. The discipline you maintain when recognition disappears. The standards you keep when shortcuts are available. The integrity you hold when compromise would be profitable. Those things matter at every level, from the invisible stage to the influence stage. And that's why the goal should never be to impress people. The goal is to become difficult to ignore. Not because of status, not because of money, but because of the value you create. Because in the end, the most powerful signal isn't wealth, it's competence, it's reliability, it's character. Those are the signals that survive every market cycle, every economic downturn, every change in fortune. Build those first, and everything else becomes easier. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more insights into wealth psychology, human behavior, and the hidden rules that shape success, make sure you subscribe. Let me ask you this. Which stage do you think most people get stuck in? The invisible stage, the recognition stage, the momentum stage, or the perception stage? Drop your answer in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. And remember, the world may respond to your signal, but your future is built by your actions. We'll see you in the next video.